Here we are. Well, hey, Mom Nation, how's it going? It's me and Laura. Right. We're here with Mental Wealth, Leave a New Legacy. And this is our, I don't know, fourth show,
I think so.
something like that. And so Laura and I, so Laura's a counselor, a pretty awesome one. And your youngest client is 6?
6. Yeah.
So I'm glad that I got that right, because that's what I always tell people. I'm like, well, she's good with kids and her youngest client is 6. So glad that I'm correct with that. But you are more focused on the individual as far as a counselor, right?
Yeah. So I'm individual counseling. I do work with some parent-child sort of relations. So as part of child counseling, they're part of a system. It's not just one kid, right? So it's a whole family. So I do have parents participate as much as possible with their kids. But yes, I don't really do couples or family as a focus, but obviously we're all part of a unit. So we always have help and support from the rest of the team.
Right. And especially with younger kids. I mean, it's probably very beneficial for you to know and start to pick up on the personalities of the environment that they're being raised in too.
Oh yeah, it matters a great deal. The parent participation is everything. And it really helps the kid feel supported in their own work, because otherwise it's like, hey, fix my kid.
Yeah.
Like that's not really, doesn't really work that way. So.
Right. And you know me, I am a firm believer that everything starts in childhood, that our personalities are developed, our habits, the way that we think, our patterns of thought, all of that is really, I mean, you tell me, am I right about that? Like, I feel like it's just all sort of grown from there, or all stems from there.
Well, yeah, I mean, we always obviously continue to learn and gain experiences as we get older, but absolutely, we're children. We're learning our view of ourselves is shaped by our parents' interaction with us, right? So we're essentially a mirror of our parents' interaction with us until we start to interact with other people and we start to develop our own identity. And we don't really have that until preteen, kind of like 8 to 9 years old, or we start to solidify a little bit more of an individuality. But most of the time we're learning from our parents how they treat us is how we're going to treat ourselves internally. How they treat us is how we're going to view ourselves. So our belief system, and therefore our behaviors and our personality traits, are shaped during that time because we're reacting to the environment. We are developing habits and behaviors that are helpful, mostly in the environment that we're in. And over time, that stuff just sort of weaves in and out and gets either more solid as a regular personality quirk, or sometimes if it's something that is dramatic and unhealed or needs help, right? Then it gets into something that we focus a little more energy on in terms of distress and pathology. But for the most part, it's not a problem until it's causing you problems. Otherwise, it's just your personality.
Right. Otherwise, it's totally fine. But I feel like it plays into so much, and oftentimes it's overlooked. And maybe some of the comforts that we're looking for too, as adults, that may or may not work for us, are sort of things that we maybe experienced at great length as a child. Like, for instance, somebody who's maybe accepting abuse from their spouse. Let's just talk about it, because I can't stand it. Every time we get on, there is like something going on in the world. Like, well, there's obviously all kinds of stuff going on in the world, but last time we were on, it was the slap heard around the world. The slap. And now, Laura, you're going to laugh at me so hard, because I'm totally addicted to the Johnny Depp trial, like totally addicted to it. And so it's silly. It's silly. I know. But what a lot of people don't know is when I originally went to school, got out of high school and went to college, I originally went to be an attorney.
Okay.
Like that's what I wanted to be ever since I was wee, little. I wanted to be an attorney, and I'm fascinated by the courtroom. And I'm fascinated by trial, and I'm fascinated by these individuals that, get up and build these cases and cross-examine witnesses. And I love all the speak, like in my house, my husband does something, I'm like, objection,
I can't.
Or if he like asked me the same question, I'm like, asked and answered.
That's hilarious. That is too much. Oh my gosh. That's too funny.
So anyway, so I've been totally glued to it. Anybody who knows me knows that I do a lot of like my paperwork and things like that late night, because who has time for that during the day? And so I sit on the couch and I have something on, and lately it has not been General Hospital. It has been the Johnny Depp trial.
Okay.
And, but the reason why I bring that up is, yes, because I'm dying to tell you that, but secondary reason is, it's a defamation of character. It's a who abused who kind of question, right? And a lot has come up about Johnny's upbringing and how his mom was super abusive, and how he just kind of found himself reverting back to that person that he was when he got hooked up with this chick that was apparently doing the same thing. I don't know, allegedly.
Yeah.
So it just seems to rear its ugly head over and over and over in multiple people's lives that I observe, whether I know them personally or it's, some movie star on TV. And it just continues to solidify that for me. And it just really continues to support personally my journey in clearing out that crap so that I can finally live a nice, free and happy life. So
yeah, that's, it's interesting, the insight, like to recognize that in yourself, like you're saying, he's sort of reverting, and he's saying like, I was reverting back to that time. Like we don't always recognize that at the time, right? It takes a little bit of hindsight for us to be removed from it and say, oh, so I was reenacting this thing that was happening in the past that I didn't have a satisfactory resolution to, that my body and my brain didn't agree on because it didn't feel over. So then it hijacked me, and then I would react and behave in the same way that I learned those behaviors in the past, right? So that reenactment, I mean, we talk about mental wealth legacy. This is generational trauma. This is why we do this way. It's a reenactment. Our brain is going to operate on best guess feedback loops. We talked about this the last time, this feedback loop system, that essentially when we get information, our brain's going to look for a satisfactory resolution. And most of the time it'll get a satisfactory resolution, recognize, okay, this is the closed loop system, and then move on. But when something is happening that is emotionally distressing, something dangerous, something overwhelming, something that's causing a high level of stress, that stress doesn't allow for this feedback loop to close. Because we're not learning in stress, we're surviving in stress. So the learning system is sort of secondary, right? Like it's not a priority. And so thanks, brain, keeping me alive. That's excellent. I appreciate it. Problem is we don't always turn back around and close the loop. So since the loop is open, oh, something similar. Oh, this must be happening. This must be that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm supposed to act like this because this is that. So I'm just going to do that same thing in that same way. And it's this reenactment. And oftentimes we're either reenacting our own abuse on others in a weird way. We're sort of abusing ourselves by abusing them, which is kind of, there's heady stuff in there, but basically we're either the victim in the interaction, or we're the perpetrator in the interaction, or we're, the savior in the interaction. We're trying to be the thing that never saved us, or we're trying to be, right? So we kind of pick a role and sort of replay it based on these learned behaviors, because we're operating in an open feedback loop that should have been closed 20 years ago, but we just didn't have what we needed in order to close it at that time. Cut to trauma therapy. We find those loops and we close them. That's what we do. That's what the purpose of therapy is. It's not to change your behaviors. It's to close your loops.
Yeah.
And then your behaviors aren't necessary anymore.
Yeah. And something that I don't know if those who are listening picked up on that you said, and I picked up on it because we've talked about it a bunch, is when you're in that sort of moment of stress, when it's, a stress point, your brain is just focusing on survival. And so it may not be giving power to some other ways of thinking. And can you just go into that just a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So this is like my jam, right? I love this.
I know.
You know why I love this so much? I love it because it helps me understand that my system was just trying to help keep me alive.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back and think, why didn't I do this? Why did I let myself get in that situation? Why did I take that abuse? Why didn't I fight? Right? And all that shame that comes with, why didn't I? Why wasn't I strong enough? Why wasn't I good enough? All those questions go away when I recognize that, oh, it's because my system was keeping me alive based on the information that I had and based on the capacity that I had in that moment to just live, to not die. So it's not that I wasn't strong enough or good enough or smart enough or any of that. It was that my brain was doing the work for me so that I could live.
Mm-hmm.
And that, well, thanks, brain. Way to go.
Yeah.
Like, let me get a little trophy. And I can feel okay about that because that's just biology.
Mm-hmm.
That's not damage. That's not pathology. That's not disorders. That's biology. That's just me. That's a human as an organism. And so when you talk about when we're surviving, we're deprioritizing other things. We're not capable of closing those feedback loops. That learning cycle, the theoretical foundation for EMDR therapy is called adaptive information processing. And so Francine Shapiro is the creator of this therapy, and that's the therapy that I practice. Adaptive information processing essentially explains to us how our brain takes in information, sorts it out, gets it through all the different areas of our brain that need to process, and then it closes that loop so that we've learned something. We have an outcome, a conclusion to whatever it is that we just learned. So when we're learning, we're safe, we're present, we're ready to just, hopefully, right? We're sort of just taking in information. Our brain is doing what it's doing. That's a perfect scenario. Most of the time, I can't say most of the time, some of the time we're under stress or duress or high overwhelm, whatever, right? In those high emotional stress situations, our brain is prioritizing survival over learning. So we're not going to complete those loops because our brain is going to need to make sure that we're operating, we're quick, we're agile, our heart rate, all these things, right, that we need in order to survive. Our brain's going to focus on those things. The learning comes secondary because it doesn't have survival value, not in that moment. The things that have survival value are your perception, your senses, right? Like you feel, you hear, when you're hyper alert and you hear something, you're like, what was that? Mm-hmm. Right? So it's that turn on, it's hyper awareness. Our survival system is giving us maybe like, we're more in tune to like people's vibes, right? We're like, you're giving me a weird vibe. What's going on? Mm-hmm. Right? I'm sensory perception is hyper aware. So like my logic and learning system is kind of just waiting until I'm done because I don't need that right now. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. So it's very moment to moment. It's very in this second, I just need to live or die. And so when we're in that survival mode for a long time, then we're only learning bits and pieces and we can sort of forget easily, or we don't have access to the helpful stuff. Like, how, I don't know if you've ever gone to therapy and they teach you like coping skills or whatever. And you're like, and then you come back and the therapist asks like, have you been using those coping skills? And you're like, no, I don't remember. I don't remember what they taught me, what my therapist taught me when I'm actually in crisis. Like, I don't have access. If I were in crisis, like having an emotional crisis, I'm not thinking to myself, oh, let me go ahead and do a box breathing and, do the, like, no, I'm freaking out. Right.
Right.
So it's because literally you don't have access to this other part of your brain to give you that helpful stuff. And so the more we realize that we're in crisis, then the knowledge that we're in crisis is enough to say, oh, let me get out of crisis. All I have to do is recognize, oh, I'm in crisis. Am I going to die? If the answer is no, then you're cool. You're fine.
Breathe. Yeah.
Breathe. Take a beat. Am I going to die? No. Okay, great. Now you can bring on your capacity. Now you can, what are those breathing things? What are those techniques? Now you can soothe and then you can move forward. But most of us, we're not really focused as much on learning that whether or not we're in crisis. All we're doing is trying to get out of it. So we don't really take that. It's kind of a nuance, right? But it's like, before we start to solve our crisis, we should actually ask ourselves, like, is this a life and death crisis?
Mm-hmm.
Because that one question is actually going to change the solution. You don't need to solve it that same way if it's not that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're up regulating and down regulating, we're doing all these things, and our body is just tired. And our body in survival mode is tired because it's not getting access to the nutrients that we need, because our digestive system isn't working right. It's not getting access to all, right? Like all the stuff.
I was just going to bring that up and, and bring that to light and say, there's other things that our brain's not paying attention to as well. And so if we're constantly living in a state of stress, like, I wonder if that's where a lot of digestive issues come from, and a lot of stomach issues, and, those kind of, like, travel down that road of, those kind of things are coming from, because I meet and talk to so many people that seem to be living in a constant state of stress. And I get that. Like, I was constant state of stress before I realized and learned, and took the breath and decided, okay, no, I'm not going to die and everything's going to be okay. Let's start unpacking and figuring out what's not working for me so that I don't have to live in constant stress. But you don't necessarily know you are either. If that's right. How it was modeled for you for so long to live. Yeah.
If we were never taught to stop and regulate, then we don't know how. And we don't realize that, like, most of the time, I think it's funny, we don't know how offline we are until we actually are asked to, like, get back on. Like, when I think about getting grounded and getting, like, back, I don't call it, it is called our window of tolerance. But when we want to get back, we need to be in our window of tolerance in order to sort of have access to all that helpful stuff, like your digestive system and your brain and all these things. And most of the time we don't realize how close we are to out of it. We don't even recognize, we think, oh, I'm fine. But, like, that's my shirt today. I'm like, I'm fine.
Oh, it's so cute.
And then it's got all the little faces, like, right? It's totally fine.
Oh.
So, we think we're fine. We're not fine. Like, we have to really be like, okay, let me just look around the room. Let me just notice where I am. Let me just really take a breath and ask myself, like, what am I doing right now? What's important right now? Am I thinking about things that aren't helpful right now?
Mm-hmm.
We don't even realize how stressed we are most of the time. I think we just think that that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
Which is,
especially if that was something that we learned from caregivers or teachers or, whomever we were close to at those very impressionable times in our lives.
Yeah.
And could that then be something that is comfortable? And so you're constantly also striving for, if you haven't realized and done any sort of pattern interrupt.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yeah. How many moms do you know, myself included, that aren't, like, highly stressed out?
Yeah. Not many.
Right? Like, parenting is stressful, dude. Like,
so hard.
It's so hard. So, like, of course we're modeling stress, but what we can also do is model calm. And calm, culturally, in our society, like, it's just not something that we really value, I don't think, as much as we could. I think there's opportunity to really value that a little bit more and start teaching that to our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the times we put our importance on our output. Like if I'm not contributing something, if I'm not adding value, like then I don't have value.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
And so we're working, we're moving, we're going, we're doing, right, moms?
We're not worrying about what us. Yeah.
Because I need to be doing, I need to be, if I'm just sitting, like how many of us think it's selfish to sit down on the couch for a half hour and just watch a show? Why aren't you? And then you're thinking, I should be folding laundry. I should be multitasking. I should be
hanging out with my kid. I should
Right.
be
right.
not watching the Johnny Depp trial right
Right.
now.
Right. And why do we believe that? We believe that because we are accomplishers. Like we get a gold star for doing. Nobody gives gold stars for just chilling.
For not doing. Exactly.
Right. So we could value calm a little bit more in order to help our kids see that calm is exactly as valuable as activity and action.
And because I'm still training myself out of it. It takes a long time when you're just so used to doing something for 40 years, you know what I mean? But when something comes up and it gets my blood pressure up, maybe something happens at work or, whatever. It's been my practice as of very recent to do what we said and just sort of stop, sit there for a half a second, breathe, because I tend to not do that. I tend to hold my breath. How weird is this? Something that I discovered not too long ago. I was like, why am I holding my breath during these times? And so I breathe, and literally this sounds so just elementary, but I think, okay, what's the absolute worst that could happen?
Oh my gosh, that's my favorite game.
That is your favorite game. Where did I learn this?
Worst case scenario game.
Yes. And then once you're like, oh, okay, well, that's the absolute worst that can happen. And, hopefully it's, not like anything fatal. That's not what I'm talking about. But, if it's something that I can totally get around, or something that is just not earth shattering, that I'm not even going to remember next week. You know what I mean? Then it's a lot easier to take. You kind of just take it cool. And when I approach a situation and I'm super stressed and I'm all jacked, and versus when I approach a situation, I'm like, whatever, let's just work it out and figure it out. It's so much different, and it goes so much better and more smooth when you're breathing and approaching things. And it seems silly, right? It even seems silly for me to say it out loud, like, duh, everybody knows that, but it's not easy in the moment.
No, it's not. And it's not about knowing either. Like we know, right? We've read the books, we see the posts, we read the things, we know the stuff. It's not about knowing, it's about believing, and it's about experiencing, like, because our brains and our bodies don't agree. Because I can know that, I don't know, I can know that my life's not going to be over if I don't cook dinner tonight and my kid's disappointed. I can logically know that, right? But I can feel like that means I'm the worst parent ever. I'm scarring my child for life. I'm making them believe that they're not valuable, or that I don't care about them. And they're going to talk about this in therapy. Like, whoa, I'm like death spiraling right now, when I really just am tired and I don't feel like making dinner. So I'm probably going to put in a frozen pizza, like whatever.
And they're probably going to be fine with it.
And they don't even care. They're fine. It doesn't matter. But I can logically know stuff, but that doesn't mean I don't believe that that's totally off. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to completely freak out and feel super duper guilty because I didn't do this thing. Right. Like, our brains and our bodies don't always agree. So when we feel like we're the worst, we often are like, that must mean I'm the actual worst. But that's just, feelings aren't facts. Sometimes they're just feelings. And as we think about ourselves and how we're showing and are modeling for our kids, going back to kind of how we teach them to just be, when we sit with our kids and they're experiencing something difficult, or I don't know, they're having a guilt trip or feeling really bad or feeling really worried or feeling really nervous, it doesn't always help to correct them logically. Right. Because like, again, I'm freaking out. If somebody tells me logically, like, oh, it's going to be okay. Like, I'm gonna be like, well, it doesn't feel like that. Right. So what we can do is kind of, all our kids might need in those moments is not some profound, this is us type lesson, like, parent child, like best conversation ever, or whatever. Sometimes it's just like, man, I can see that you feel really, really worried. Let's sit together.
Yeah. I actually have a great example about this. And I just love talking with you because I really do learn a lot of stuff. So thank you. But my 8-year-old, so my sister-in-law was in town and we were having dinner, I don't know, Monday night, Sunday night, something like that. And it was like 9 of us, and we were all sitting around the table, and the waitress came out with these huge honking giant waters for the kids. And I kind of was like, well, we'll see how this goes. Cause mine is constantly moving and playing with stuff and the salt shakers and the menus and the everything. Right. So he was doing his normal thing, and both my husband and I are just like not watching, because we know what's going to happen. And there's a point where I just don't want to, like, I get sick and tired of saying no, don't, stop all the time. And so I'm just like, you know what, do your own thing. I'm just not going to watch, and I hope all goes well. Well, sure enough, he's fooling around and he dumps this huge water all over the table. It goes all over my niece. She's 12. So of course, what does it get all over? Her phone, right? It's just, she's like, oh my gosh, my phone. And she's soaked. Her whole front is soaked and everything. And so she takes off with my mother-in-law, goes to the bathroom to dry out. And I look down at the table, and he's kind of like looking at us like, am I going to get in trouble? Like, what's going to happen here? But I could just see he was just devastated. Like he
of course,
he was crushed. So I was like, come here, buddy. And so he comes up, and I was just holding him, and he's trembling. Finally, he starts to cry, and he's like, I just feel terrible. And I was like, I know, babe, I know. Worst case scenario is if something is wrong with her phone, we can fix that, right? It's cool. We can fix it. And Mimi's in the bathroom, probably getting her under the warm blower to dry off her skirt. And I think she's going to be all right. But you can stay here as long as you want, and I'll hug you. And everybody here understands it was an accident. And we just hope that your feelings get better soon.
Yeah.
And he stayed for a while.
Yeah.
And he just kind of hugged and cried a little bit in my shoulder. But then he was cool. And when she came back to the table, he looked at her and he was like, I'm really sorry. And I didn't ask him to do that. He did it, and he was cool the rest of the night. He was totally chill.
Yeah. That's accepting his feelings.
Mm-hmm.
How many of us are going to be like, oh, don't cry. Like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. Like,
right.
We get distressed when our kids are in distress.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? We try to tell them to stop being in distress so that we can feel better.
Exactly.
That's not helpful.
It's not helpful.
Not helpful. And so, but we don't do that. We're not doing it on purpose. Like, we're not trying to be jerk parents, like, right. But we just are like, oh my gosh, my kid's upset. Like, this is dinner. I'm embarrassed now. Like, I don't even know. So like what I need is for my kid to feel like it's fine so that I can feel like it's fine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the opposite is actually true. Your kid needs to know that it's fine so that they can feel fine. And then once they feel fine, everything's fine.
Right.
So reverse the process.
Yeah. All too often. And, it's something that we're working on as a family as well. I've been really hypersensitive to it. My husband kind of not so much, but when you tell somebody not to feel a certain way, that's like, right? Like, you tell us in just a sec what exactly that does to the adult person. But my husband will do that. And he doesn't mean you can't feel a certain way. He means just what you said. Hey, it's okay.
Right.
No one's upset. You don't have to feel that way, but that's not the words that he's using. And so that's not the idea that's being conveyed or absorbed on the other end. And God love him. he's an amazing man, and he's an amazing dad. And, we're as a family working on many things. But that is one of them. And I just feel like that's so destructive to the child and to the future adult. And you tell me, like, what does that do? I feel like it just disassociates them with their feelings, maybe makes them feel like their feelings aren't accurate or not theirs, or like, what have you seen come out of that?
I mean, all of that, right? They're not allowed to feel that. It's not safe. It's not safe to express whatever feeling is feeling. So if it's not safe for me to express anger, well, then what am I going to do with my anger?
Suppress.
Yeah. If it's not safe for me to express sadness, because whenever I get sad, my mom gets really upset and tells me how sad she is that you feel sad. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I hear that all the time. Like, oh, it makes me so sad when I see you sad. Like, don't be sad. What are we trying to do? We're trying to relate. We're trying to help them understand how other people feel. Like, we're trying to help. We think we're doing the best we can. We are doing the best we can. We think that's helpful. But what we don't really realize is a simple, like, say this, not that, in some of these exchanges can make a big difference, right? So it can be, I see that you're really sad. I understand sometimes we feel sad, let me be here with you while you feel sad. Let me know what you need. I'll be right here. And that's it. And we can have those conversations with our kids, because what they need is they need their distress to be accepted, because it's part of them too. So I want my partner as an adult to be okay when I'm not okay. That's giant. Because I need them to, because if I'm not okay and then they're not okay because I'm not okay, well, now, A, it's not okay for me not to be okay. B, I'm totally alone in this, because if I have any kinds of problems, I don't have anybody to help me.
No support.
Like, there's so much, right? I can go down the list, but I need my person to be okay, so that when I'm not okay, I know that the ship's not sinking. So as a child, I need so much more. I am dependent. My life depends on my parents' stability. Their emotional stability when I am in distress. The single most important thing that we can do as parents, aside from make sure our kids have a roof and food, is to make sure that when they are in distress, we have stability. Because otherwise, no amount of distress is safe.
I totally agree. And tell me what you think about this idea. Same example, parent saying to kid, hey, when you're sad, it makes me sad. Are we now creating some sort of dependence, like codependency on other people's feelings? Let's talk about that, because I think that's something that people don't pick up on.
Yeah. So, because what you just told me is that when I'm sad, you get sad. So that means I'm in control of your feelings.
Yeah. Ouch.
That also means that I'm responsible for your feelings.
Ouch.
So it's my fault if you're upset. And if I can't make you happy, well, then that means I'm a failure. And if somebody else in my life is upset and I can't make them happy, well, then I'm a failure. And now every time I see anybody be upset, I think it's about me. And I think, did I do something wrong? What did I do? Like, is everything okay? Are you mad at me? Right? I've been been in that space where I'm like, are you okay? Is everything, because I'm like, oh my God, you're upset and I can't fix it. And like, that's my shit. I get that in myself. And so that's a training issue. So kids of depressed parents, let's just talk about, I've been depressed. I've had depression my whole life. I am sometimes unable to be happy, right? So I can't be gleeful, right? Sometimes I'm tired. That makes me frustrated. Sometimes I'm shorter tempered. I'm easier to anger. I'm, less helpful. I'm less attuned. I'm less attentive. So my kids then, because of that, are experiencing themselves through me by kind of thinking, is there something, how can I make my mom happy?
Yeah.
What can I do? Because our kids depend on our stability, right? So because they're sensing, oh, you're not okay. Well, crap. If you're not okay, the wheels fell off. Like we've got to, this is an emergency. So they need to make sure that we're okay. And so the best thing that I can do as a person who experiences depression is I can say to my kids, I am having a tough day. So that means I'm a little more tired, or that means I'm having a hard mood, or like I'm just in a sort of low mood or whatever, right? Just kind of explaining like, I'm not feeling my best. That's it. I'm not feeling my best, but I am really okay. We are safe. Like everything is going to still go on the same way that it needs to. We're all going to be okay. You are doing a great job. You are doing just fine, child, right? Like I'm glad that you are doing so well at your homework. I'm glad. Thank you for doing the dishes like you're supposed to, right? Like we're still sort of saying, my mood is not dependent on you. I'm having a hard day. That's me as a grown-up. And I'm still here to take care of you. I'm still here to make sure that you're safe. My role in your life is to keep you physically and emotionally safe. And when we can sort of separate, like distance our emotional reaction from our child's behaviors, then we can teach them a sense of separateness so that they're not dependent on other people's behaviors in the future. And they don't feel responsible for us because it's too much.
It's way too much. And I feel like it's really setting them up for failure later on in life. I mean, in jobs, in friendships, in romantic relationships, when you're like, because then the shoe's on the other foot too. So if I'm responsible for your feelings, well, guess who's responsible for mine?
You are.
Yeah. And now like, that's insane. Like, I feel like if everybody in the world were responsible for themselves, were in control of their own happiness or unhappiness, and it wasn't anybody else's fault, because it really truly isn't, then where would we be?
In a way different place.
Way different place. There is way too much weight placed on you for my
other
feelings.
People. Yeah.
It's insane.
It is. And when you were saying it sets them up for failure, like you will literally fail. Like if it's impossible, right? Because it's not possible. It's not possible for me to be responsible for your feelings. I cannot control your feelings. So if my belief is that it's my responsibility to make you happy, then I will fail. It's true. Then what statement comes into our heads that is the worst statement of all time, which is the one that hurts us all to our core, which is, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to control your feelings, Katie. That is objectively true. So where do those beliefs come from in us? Who's got that loop? Who's got that I'm not good enough loop? I know I've had it.
So many.
Comes up for me.
Yep.
And when we're realizing that, oh, it's because I'm believing that it's my responsibility to do something that is actually impossible to do, well, then objectively, that's a fact. Can't do it. Not going to be able to do it. So when we help our kids realize that they're responsible for their own feelings, they're allowed to have them, and we're going to be with them. And we're going to say, hey, sadness, let's just sit here together, because there's room for that here. But if other people's distress, our children's distress especially, is going to activate us on a level that we can't control our own distress, and that we're sort of projecting onto them, like, hey, you need to be okay so that I can be okay, then that's an indicator that maybe we have some stuff that we need to work out. And every single person on the entire planet has at one point or another depended on another person for their own emotional stability, and has felt responsible for somebody else's emotional stability. That is true. Just human nature. We do that. Totally. So that's okay. There's nothing bad about that. It's just it doesn't serve you in the role of motherhood. So as we're mothers now, we need to choose to say, oh, okay, this doesn't serve. Let me figure that out so that I can be the one, keeping the ship afloat when my kid is having a complete meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody's got to keep it afloat. Otherwise, we're both just up a creek, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we talk about generational stuff, it has a lot to do with what we've learned about our responsibility to ourselves and to others, and what's safe and what's not safe. And I think more people could really value emotional regulation and stability, to just be like, okay, I am feeling this way and that is okay.
Yeah. And why do we have such a problem with other people being sad or angry or whatever name, insert name of feeling here?
Yeah.
Like, why do we feel, I was going to say such a responsibility for that, but we kind of talked about that. I don't understand. Like, I'm maybe not making a lot of sense right now.
I can feel your question. I think what you're asking is, why is it so hard for us to sit with somebody else when they're in distress?
Yeah. Why is it so uncomfortable?
I think because distress is uncomfortable. It makes us uncomfortable, right? Because I don't know what to say, because I'm just sitting and I'm feeling its distress, and nobody likes to sit in distress. Our immediate sort of go-to is how we've been trained. Oh, distress, fix it. Problem, solve it. Like, as if distress or feelings in and of themselves are problems to solve. That's what we're learned. That's what we're taught. A negative feeling is a problem to solve. It's not.
It's not. I feel like, what if we just let ourselves feel that feeling and we did not beat up on ourselves about it or beat up on others when they're going through it? Because isn't there a certain, I think we've talked about this on a previous show before, but there's a certain sort of process that you go through, right? And so if you're interrupting that natural process, then you're never really getting the value out of it.
Well, I think that's true. And I think that the reason why we don't is because as kids, we have those open circuits, right? So going back to the feedback loop, going back to this open circuit, let's say this open circuit contains a lot of hurt, contains a lot of betrayal, contains a level of pain that when we were kids, we had to push away because it was too big for us, because we didn't have the capacity as a child to handle it. So now, every time something similar happens, it activates this circuit. So this child level feeling of distress, which is big, right? Kids have big feelings, feels that much bigger to us because it's connecting to this old thing. So as adults, like today, somebody who hasn't necessarily solved through some old stuff isn't going to have the capacity to sit with distress because it's activating their distress, which they don't have the capacity to address. So you literally just don't have that skill yet. And so we've got to build our own capacity for distress, build our own window of tolerance for distress by sorting through some of that old stuff, by saying, hey, this stuff is big and it needs to be addressed, but it's not so big that it's dangerous. Feelings are not dangerous.
No.
And so we need resources. Like, I'm packing for a trip to visit this memory, this feeling, this trauma. What am I going to bring? Do I need confidence? Do I need happiness? Do I need a partner? Do I need a symbol of hope? Do I need a spiritual figure? Do I need, right? Let me pack my bag. So this is the bag of resources that you build in order to then feel like you have the tools to go visit this distress, walk through it as an adult, sort of reflect and move forward from it, like close that loop. But in order to access that loop, you need to have some resources built. So that's what phased approach to therapy. Any trauma therapy is done in phases, because nobody, I don't even know half my clients' trauma until session 5.
Right.
Because why? For what? because I'm curious. Like, no, we're going to talk about that later. Right now, what do we need in your suitcase to be able to go and visit that together? So we're going to build those capacities before we even touch it, because that's just safer. It's safer that way. I wouldn't send you to Alaska after packing for Tahiti.
Right. So you kind of work backwards with your clients, in other words, like start now and go back versus start back and come forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, depending on, so where we start is, where are you today? What are you working? What's the symptom?
Like, why are you here?
Right. Like, what's the thing that's causing you the distress? Like, is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it sadness? Is it grief? Is it whatever, right? Like, what is it? And then we say, okay, so then we can kind of say, like, is that coming from old stuff? And then we could get a sense of it. And once we have a sense of a thematic idea of like what belief is kind of there, what feeling is there, what stuff is in there, we can kind of say, okay, what might I need in order to approach that stuff? Like, let's say the stuff is from my childhood. Okay, cool. What do you need to know in order to visit that memory? Like, we don't need to get the details of that right now. What we need to do is pack for the trip. And packing for the trip is about building capacity for calm, building that capacity to sit with it. And as you learn how to do that, you can start sitting with your kids. You don't even have to process the trauma all the way. Like, you get the gains come from just being able to sit with it.
Yeah. And I feel like you kind of, I mean, I don't know if any of your clients do this, but my gains kind of happen between, you know what I mean? And in your learning and you're observing and you're like, oh, well, this is where I can make a small switch. And it's kind of like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but it works for me. I just kind of always reach for the better feeling thought.
Okay.
So I'm reaching for the better feeling thought, and then it eventually brings me to a more hopeful, like say I'm in sadness or something to that effect. And then it brings me sort of to a more hopeful area where I feel like I have more access to tools.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of my habit and sort of my way of doing it.
Yeah. And there's 1,000 ways, and that's a perfect way. And so for everybody who can think about that, as you're listening and thinking, maybe that'll work for me. What's a better feeling thought? Like, walk me through that. Give me an example. What's something that you might do that with?
So sometimes it's truly basic. So something happens, it knocks me off my, my, what am I trying to say? My stoop, whatever, my thing knocks me off. I'm out of balance. And I'll go as basic as, I have an amazing family.
Okay.
I am, I've got a roof over my head that I quite enjoy. I have, I'm really, it's basic stuff, but that starts to bring, okay, so it's not totally life ending and earth shattering because it's not going to disturb these things. And is that a good example? I don't know.
That's a great example. That's perfect. Yeah. So it could be anything. So for anyone who thinks, what could be a better feeling thought? Like, literally anything is the answer. And it's not about solving the content of the problem. All you're doing is reaching for a resource. That thought, that better feeling thought, is like something that makes it easier to work through the distress that you're in. So it's like, if I don't know, like let's say you're somewhere cold, you're not going to not have you can't change the temperature outside, but you can grab a jacket. The better feeling thought is the jacket. Doesn't change the temperature outside, but what it does is it gives you something to have with you to make it easier to get through. Because what we're never trying to do is ignore. We're not trying to just get it to go away. We're trying to just have something that helps us be okay. And then when the better feeling thought kind of takes us enough far enough into where we're not feeling the distress anymore, then we've made it through.
And then you have access to the tools that you need to work through it, whatever that may be. It's incredible how much stress blocks that.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So like, for instance, and this may be a silly example, but it's an example. So for instance, back in the day in my, very early 20s, when I started singing and I started singing on stage in front of large audiences, with my band and stuff, in the beginning, when I was really sort of stage fright, I don't have it anymore, but when I really had stage fright, I would forget my words. So I would have to have something, for my words.
Totally.
Or in between songs, I totally forgot how to be charming and funny and say something cute to the audience. Like, I had no idea. I just would sort of stand there like this. And as I got more practice and I started to, have more confidence in what I was doing, that I didn't need my words so much anymore, because I figured, well, screw it. If I forget, I just make them up. It's fine,
Right.
Or who cares if I'm a total dork in between songs? I'm just going to say something. I'm the one on stage. They're not, you know what I mean? And just stuff like that. And then I had access to cute and funny things that I would say. Then I had access to all of my lyrics, all that stuff I had access to.
Yeah. Because you remind yourself, like, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Am I going to survive this? Yep, probably. All right, great. Very few, seldomly, we're actually in a life and death situation.
Right.
Sometimes when we're in a life and death situation, go ahead and let your stuff do its thing, because that's going to keep you alive. Like, I don't need to tell you how to handle that. Your body and your brain is going to do that for you. So it's only when you're not, like, if the answer is yes, if you're like, am I going to die? And the answer is yes, like, all right, then let your body and brain do the stuff, survive, right?
Exactly.
Like, you can physiologically have that. But when the answer is no, oh, okay, that gives me more capacity. So one more thought about that and how that relates to, as we think about how we see and relate with our kids. Think about how vulnerable a human baby is.
Totally.
They're literally in danger, like 100% of the time. Like, they're just straight up, like, if something, they're helpless. Okay. So if going back to our, am I going to die? That's true way more often. Okay. So when a baby child is not in contact with a parent, their system is telling them, you're going to die. You don't have somebody to take care of you, you'll literally die. Because that's technically true. If you don't have somebody to take care of you, you'll die. So that's what's happening. So it's not that your kid is just like freaking out or overreacting or totally extra. Like, we kind of assign these things because we know they're not going to die, but they literally don't know that. So it's our job to be like, whoa, I know that was really scary for you. I'm right here. You're safe.
So, and funny thing, we're at the end of the show and we haven't even gotten to our topic yet. So we're going to have to push that. That's totally funny, but I think this was great. And it was totally like a natural conversation that I think needed to happen. But we were talking about? Oh, so if a parent, say, hasn't bonded with their child for whatever reason, like from baby, or they are, like we had stated an example earlier in the show, they're distressed because their child is distressed. So then they're unavailable. So these are kind of examples of what you mean about, the baby sort of being in that danger zone, basically, like things like that.
Yeah. We're programmed. A human baby is biologically programmed to have that connection and attunement, that I'm with you and I'm keeping you safe. Like, I'm the protector and I see you and I feel you and I have you, right? That I've the feeling of I've got you, and that you're safe with me and you can be anything you are. they're biologically wired to need to connect with their caregiver, to align with us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to keep them alive. That's a survival instinct.
So I wonder, and oh my gosh, we'll have to talk about this another time, but I wonder if, so when I had my son, I was an older mom and you know, I like kind of read up on everything you should do. And then I forgot it all because I was stressed.
Yeah.
But you know, I heard a lot about, and I actually did it quite a bit, heard a lot about like skin to skin contact with your baby, like your new baby.
Yeah.
And you know, if he was sleeping, I'd wear him around the house in a sling or something like that, just so that he was close. Like, I wonder if that things like that help to solidify this bond for them, because it's such a nature thing. Like, if they can't see you or touch you, how do they know you're there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know? Yeah, it's physical. And so my son, Max, and we should talk about this another time, but Max, my middle child, he was born and he was sick. He was in the NICU. I couldn't have contact with him. I couldn't hold him. I couldn't feed him. We lived in Germany at the time, and like my whole story is long, but it's different there, where we as moms in the NICU now, we could stay 24/7, you know, you're always at whatever. It wasn't like that there. So I was only able to be there for a couple of hours, and I was only allowed to feed him if I got there right on time, and it was a whole thing. So I didn't get that. He didn't have that for 3 whole weeks. And so it's not always possible to do those things, but what is possible is to give a vibe, right? So like sometimes if it's not physical, it's perception.
They can
It's
read that
vibe,
too.
right? Because when we're unavailable emotionally, you can feel that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can talk. I think it's a really, there's a list every single time of things I think, oh, we need to add that. But the vibes that we can really share with our kids about our safety and trust, and just sending that out and kind of receiving that, and how that can look and feel when we have a child who maybe is visually impaired. Mm-hmm. Maybe we have a child who's hearing impaired, right? They can't hear our voice. There's all these things that the books say, do this, do that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work for everyone. And so the stuff that you're expressing is like, that's great. And what is one of the things that you get to do, and that helps the bond. And then there's other things that other moms do that help the bond. And there's other things like nursing versus not nursing, and feeding differently, and right, like there's all these things. And so sometimes I think I remember feeling like as a mom, I can't bond with my kid because I can't hold him. Like, this is the word, right? Mm-hmm. Like all that guilt, there's so much. And I know there's other moms out there who've experienced that too. And it's not all is lost. And I think I'm so glad that you brought that up, because the physical, the emotional vibes, the spiritual connection, there's so much that we can give to our kids in unconventional ways. And I think we could talk more about that for sure.
I just wrote it down.
Oh my gosh.
This is a good topic for the next one.
Yeah.
All right, Laura. Yes. Well, this was an awesome talk. Thank you so much for humoring me and going off on a tangent.
This is great.
That all started with, you know what, I won't bring it up again. But I know it's funny, but you know, whatever. Where can our audience reach out to you and connect with you if they have questions, if they want to consult with you? Give it to us, sister.
Oh boy. Well, I'm at Benaviri, BENAVIERI.com, and on Facebook, at Benaviri. Should be easy to find. And anywhere in MOMnation, you can look me up as well. So I really appreciate being here. I love it. This is my favorite. We can always go off topic.
We totally, yes, it is totally my favorite too. I love talking with you because I feel like, well, it's like this every time we get together, either on or off camera, but I feel like it's always too short. Like we always look at each other and we're like, what? It's over already?
I can't believe it's already after 5. I'm like, oh no, whoops.
Next time. All right, my dear.
All right. I appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.